All right, so Friedrich Nietzsche. His name has like five consonants in a row in it. um, so Nietzsche was German. He lived from 1844 to 1900, so his life obviously overlaps with William James. And Nietzsche is probably the most controversial philosopher of all time, and his viewpoints are still controversial now. They were certainly controversial back when he was writing over 100 years ago. And Nietzsche gets a really bad reputation, and I think it's mostly because people didn't understand exactly what he was trying to say. You can certainly disagree with him, but I want to make sure you understand what he meant by the things that he said. So, you're probably more familiar with Nietzsche than you think. He's the one that famously said God is dead. We're going to talk about what he meant by that. And he's also the first person that said what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, which has been in like every pop song that has come out in the last 10 or 15 years. And interesting side note, Kanye West has a song that says that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger, just not in his proper grammar. And he was sued by some random band that made a song that said the same thing in like the 60s or 70s or something. The name escapes me. And he actually won the lawsuit by saying that he was not ripping off that band, he was ripping off Nietzsche. Now, no offense to Kanye West, but I suspect his lawyers probably had more to do with that than he did. So, uh, Nietzsche pretty much criticized everything that happened before him in philosophy, and your book points out that he said he did philosophy with a hammer, where he basically went through everybody that came before him and just kind of like smashed it to bits to show how hollow it was. And one of the big things that Nietzsche is going to criticize here is modernity or the modern time period. And this is the time period that began with Descartes and ended with Kant. There was a lot of stuff that happened in the middle there, which I mentioned briefly back when we were talking about it. But this is the time period where you got widespread democracy and capitalism, mass media, mass culture, mass literacy, science and technology were booming, and people were starting to look to science and technology for answers where they used to look to the church for answers. You also had a big focus on individualism and rationality and things like that. Now, most of us consider all of those things to be fantastic and great leaps and bounds that society has made. Nietzsche was not a fan, and there are several reasons why. Just to give you one quick example, we're going to talk about more of them. Take mass literacy. So it used to be back in the day that very few people could read or write. And the only people that could really read or write were people who were from very wealthy backgrounds, who had the luxury of not having to work their whole lives, and also had the money to afford a private tutor because there really wasn't institutionalized education that was available to the masses. So there still is a lot more illiteracy than people maybe think, but obviously during this time period there was a huge explosion where more and more people are able to read and write, and nowadays it's something that we definitely take for granted and complain that we have to learn in school when we're young, which just shows you how much times have changed. Now, right off the bat, that seems like a really positive thing. Like, why would he be mad that a bunch of people now can read and write? Well, think about what this has done to our writing. So it used to be that the only people who were writing were people that had a really great education, and they had these fantastic ideas. They were very creative. They knew how to explain them in a way that was very poetic and vivid mental imagery and all sorts of things. Now, when anybody can read and write, uh, perhaps the quality has gone down. So think of the difference between Shakespeare and Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey or something. No offense if you're a fan of those books, but there certainly is a difference between quality of literature in a world where not only everybody knows how to write, but everybody can write. And now with the internet, I mean, maybe that's another great example, right? Nietzsche wouldn't have known anything about the internet, but I guarantee you he would have hated it because now anybody can give any opinion, no matter how insane or ridiculous, and it doesn't have to be well written, and you can just get it out there and everybody can see it. And most of Nietzsche's beef with modernity was, okay, all these things happen and everybody thinks they're so great, but it all happened so quickly and we got so used to it that we never stopped to consider what cost it came at. We paid a high price for these things and we don't even notice what it cost us. So before we get to more of those criticisms, I want to mention the will to power. So Nietzsche thought that everything that everybody did was just an example of the will to power. And the will to power is this need and desire to control others and force our own values and beliefs upon them. And he thought that this was what the entire history of philosophy was nothing more than the will to power, with philosophers wanting everybody to adopt their beliefs and their worldview and to look at everything in the way they did. He also thought religion was extremely guilty of this, that religion is really just about enforcing your own belief system on other people. He thought science was the same way. Scientists just want everybody to adopt their worldviews. And people don't do this maybe with that intention. So obviously, scientists and philosophers and religions think that what they're doing is giving people the truth. They think they're helping people, but really the actual motivation is really just about wanting to control others and wanting others to adopt our own views and beliefs about the world. Now, in the same way that everything in the world is about the will to power, Nietzsche is also going to say that we live in this world now, in this time period, and yeah, he was writing a while ago, but still applies, where we can no longer have the sort of worldview that we used to be able to, because science has taken that away from us. We used to think that humans were special. We used to think that we were made specifically lovingly by God with this great plan and that the whole world was for us. And then Darwin came along and showed, actually, it's just totally random and we're not special at all. And if we are special, it's just because we got the total evolutionary luck of the draw and happened to evolve into beings with greater intelligence and reasoning capabilities and creativity and things like that other animals don't have to the level that we do. But we're no longer special. It's not all about us. And we think the Earth was the center of the solar system and that everything literally revolved around us. But we know now that's not true. We're one of many planets that goes around a sun, and we're one of many galaxies, many solar systems, and this endless universe, right? We're this tiny, insignificant speck. So we used to think that we were so special. We used to think very highly of ourselves. And Nietzsche's going to say we just don't live in the world ever since modernity and all these things happen. We don't live in that world anymore. We can't still think that we're that amazing. So he comes to this conclusion of nihilism, which is Latin for nothing. And it's usually attributed to any sort of belief where you're going to like deny something. So sometimes you hear nihilism used to describe a denial of God. Sometimes it's a denial of morality. And sometimes it's a denial that there's any meaning or purpose to life. And Nietzsche believed in nihilism in all three ways. The most common use of the term is the belief that there is no meaning of life. There is no purpose. It's just totally random that we're here, and that's it. There is no divine purpose that's either put in place by a god or and some other deity. There's something that the universe is trying to get us to do. We're just kind of on our own, and it's just sort of random that we're here. Now, nihilism seems like a very, very depressing conclusion to come to. There is no God, there's no meaning, there's no purpose, there's no direction, there's no guidance, there's no morality, like nothing. We're just kind of on our own. To most people, that's so scary and depressing that they immediately reject it as being totally wrong without even seriously considering the possibility that maybe Nietzsche was right. Now, for Nietzsche, though, this isn't a depressing viewpoint. This is, number one, an inevitable conclusion if we really, truly investigate our beliefs and the knowledge and information and facts that we have about our world. People are just too afraid or in denial to admit it. But he also thought this is not depressing and pessimistic. And this led to what he called tragic optimism. And tragic optimism is this viewpoint that, okay, yes, the tragic part is obviously there is no meaning, there is no purpose, there is no God, nothing really matters. But the optimistic part is, but that's so liberating. Because that means that you create your own purpose. You create your own meaning. You create your own values. You don't have to take a one-size-fits-all prescription like a lot of religions want you to do, or like Aristotle wanted everybody to do, thinking that eudaimonia was a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. We each, as individuals, have the freedom to create our own meaning and purpose and rules to live by and everything. So it might seem like a depressing place to be, but Nietzsche's going to say, no, this is actually an incredibly optimistic thing. It's a very liberating thing. It's a very beautiful place to be in the world when you have all the freedom to make those decisions yourself and create your own life in the way that you want it. Now, Nietzsche was a humorous fellow. And we get a little tidbit here just that gives us a window into that, which is called Nietzschean perspectivism. And this is the viewpoint that really everything is, every viewpoint, every religion, every philosophical system, every scientific viewpoint, every political mindset, every cultural analysis, everything is really just one possible interpretation of the facts. And that's it. So it's all a matter of perspective. And to see what Nietzsche's talking about here, think of something like Christianity. They all have the same sacred text, the Bible, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, of denominations within Christianity. And what they differ on is the way to interpret these things, right? Any one given verse can be interpreted in countless different ways. And those differences in interpretation are why there's so many different denominations and they don't agree on everything. So, this is the same for everything. All scientific viewpoints are just possible interpretations of the facts. Same thing with philosophy, religion, all these things. Now, Nietzsche's also going to turn this back on himself and say everything is just one possible interpretation, including Nietzschean perspectivism. So the idea that everything is a matter of perspective is also just a matter of perspective. So Nietzsche was kind of humorous and certainly aware of all the implications of what he was saying. Now, Nietzsche gets a bad reputation for being affiliated with Nazism. Now, clearly he died in 1900, so he wasn't around when everything went down. But Hitler did use Nietzsche to defend some of his choices and his attitudes about the Jewish people. Now, Nietzsche was not a Nazi. He even went as far as to, and he wasn't anti-Semitic, since Nazi wasn't a thing when he was alive. He was not anti-Semitic or against the Jewish people in any way, and he actually went as far as to say that he thought the Jews were the most noble race in all of Europe. But unfortunately, Nietzsche's sister was a Nazi, and after Nietzsche died, she took some of his unfinished manuscripts and changed them and added some things to make them more directly support this sort of anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish perspective. And it took a while before scholars realized that this was not what Nietzsche had written, and it has since been fixed, and there's nothing anti-Semitic in his writings in the way that Hitler was trying to grab it for. But unfortunately, he gets this kind of bound up by reputation sort of a thing, which is unfortunate. And there were some things that he did say about Judaism as a religion that were not positive, and we're going to talk about that I'm going to talk about that in the next video.